Welcome to Murder Mile, a true crime podcast, an audio-guided walk featuring many of London's untold, unsolved and long-forgotten murders, all set within and beyond the West End. Today's episode is the concluding part about the kidnapping of Amarjit Chohan, the modest millionaire who was drugged and tortured to sign away his fortune. But having resisted for the sake of his family's future, his kidnappers knew there was only one way to break him.
Murder Mile is researched using authentic sources. It contains moments of satire, shock and grisly details, and is a dramatisation of the real events. It may also feature loud and realistic sounds, so that, no matter where you listen to this podcast, you'll feel like you're actually there. My name is Michael. I am your tour guide,
And this is Murder Mile. Episode 125, Signed in Blood, Part 2. Still gagged, as several hairs from his moustache were ripped out by the roots as the brown parcel tape was torn from his nose. Although Amarjit could breathe again, he couldn't scream. With black eyes, purple skin, and slick red streaks running unevenly down the puffy lumps of his once pleasant face, the shattered man slumped in the Floorwell armchair, his feet bound and his mouth muffled, as the rest of the reel of tape dangled at the back of his plastic-smothered head. All this pain, all this fear, he knew it could be over in the stroke of a pen. But so would his family's futures. Repeatedly, Amarjit had refused to sign a single blank sheet. He knew he was dead whether he signed them or not. But he also knew one other thing. Without a signature, his kidnappers had nothing. It is said that a humble man is often born out of humble beginnings. But this was not the case with Kenneth Regan. Since he was a boy, Kenneth Roy Regan had despised his working-class life. Burdened by big dreams, little patience, and a basic education, his teenage years were spent in the little village of South Newton, where he lived with his father Roy, in a cramped two-roomed bungalow at 3 Forge Close. Kenneth wanted it all: fast living, loose women, sports cars and fancy suits. Not being a man of style or culture, he lacked the looks and charisma to succeed, and his knowledge of business was non-existent. He was a fantasist who pictured himself as a wealthy playboy and a criminal mastermind. But being prone to bragging and bullshit, and fueled by a fiery temper, he wanted everything right here, right now. Nicknamed Captain Cash, alongside his pal William Hornsey, they netted £175 million in fake passports, having recruited the homeless at £50 a go. Having muscled in on a legitimate insurance firm, he used this to launder money. Flooding the streets with Class A drugs, they once smuggled 15 tons in a hand-built submarine. And in April 1997, Michael Shalamak, a Southampton businessman, vanished without a trace. But in an eerie similarity to the recorded message, Michael's wife Yvonne would receive a letter claiming that her husband had ran away to Nigeria. And although Hampshire police hadn't enough evidence to convict him, the last person to see Michael alive was Kenneth Regan. By the mid to late 90s, Kenneth was living the crass, flashy life that he dreamed of. With slick, shiny suits, chunky gold chains, and swigging Cristal. He drove a Mercedes, he partied in Monte Carlo, and he showered beautiful women with expensive gifts, as a way to excuse his lack of manners and looks. In his eyes, he had it all. And then, he lost the lot. In June 1998, as police swooped on his lockup in North London, Kenneth fled, ran over a policewoman, and having crashed his car, in the boot they found bundles of cash and 30 kilos of heroin. His criminal career was over, and charged with assault, laundering, fraud, forgery, and drug smuggling. The 46-year-old was sentenced to 27 years in prison. Only Kenneth didn't plan on serving any time. So turning Queen's evidence, Kenneth became a supergrass for the National Criminal Investigation Squad. A snitch who ratted out everyone he knew to save himself. Whether a drug dealer, a smuggler, a gangster, and even his own partner, William Hornsey. His evidence smashed up a £2 billion cocaine smuggling ring. 15 wanted criminals were locked up for decades, and in return, his 27-year sentence was reduced to 8, but he served only 3. In June 2002, 51-year-old Kenneth Regan, having changed his name to Kenneth Avery, left prison with nothing but the shirt on his back, the lint in his pockets, and a contract on his head. Everything had been confiscated: his cars, his homes, and his ill-gotten gains. His flashy Merc was swapped for a crappy old Peugeot. His tailored suits became jeans and jumpers. High-tiered Harvey Nichols was replaced with chip butties in front of the telly box with his elderly dad Roy, a good man who eked out his pension as a cleaner at Salisbury train station. And now, as he did as a little kid, he was kipping in his dad's bungalow at 3 Forge Close. Right then, it felt like he had achieved nothing. Owing to the strict conditions of his parole, as a HGV driver, he earned a modest living hauling freight for different businesses. One of which was a successful fruit and veg import firm called Seba Freight. In 1997, he had befriended Belinda Bruin, an elegant and successful PR exec with a solid reputation and some serious celebrity clout. She was everything that he never was: smart, honest, and trusted. Having brushed off his advances before, she kept Kenneth at arm's length. But having recently been dumped by her partner and lumped with the fees of her daughter's private school and the mortgage to a 50-acre estate in Devon, she had a very exclusive lifestyle to live, but now no means to afford it. As a friend, and he hoped a lover, Kenneth offered to help Belinda out with a job. It seemed legit, only she would be drawn into a deadly deal, posing as a respectable front for his scams. Kenneth had scams galore. While still on probation, he was scouting farms to turn into cannabis factories. He was planning to smuggle 2.5 tons of cocaine in via the seaport of Fishguard. And in January 2003, a £3 million deal to build a McDonald's franchise in Hatton Cross had collapsed. But this failure gave him a greater insight into Amarjit and his business. Hitting upon a new plan from an old scam, he would lure Amarjit somewhere remote, kidnap him, drug him and beat him, force him to sign over his wealth, his life and his business, and once that was done, kill him, dump him, and claim that he had fled the country. Unable to do this alone, he recruited William Hornsey, his old pal whose information to the police had sent him to prison for 3 years, as well as Peter Rees, a 38-year-old burglar with a crap moustache, a bad mullet, and an okay accent when it came to posing as a Dutch buyer. Within a few days, the kidnapping was arranged. A white transit van was rented, a safe house was secured at a small bungalow, a vial of GHB was ordered, and while fitting a mezzanine floor at Seba Freight, they swiped a few rolls of brown parcel tape, several pens, and a stack of blank paper headed with the company logo. A few calls were made, a plausible deal was agreed, a time and a place was arranged, and having driven his blue Ford Escort to a secluded lane near Stonehenge, by the morning of Thursday the 13th of February 2003, Amarjit Chohan had vanished. It should have been a simple plan: kidnap, torture, murder and dump. But Amarjit's refusal to sign the papers wasn't his only problem. Nancy knew that something was seriously wrong. She just didn't know what. But she feared the worst. Exactly how and when it happened is unknown. Late on Saturday the 15th of February 2003, a rented white transit van pulled up at 35 Sutton Road in Heston. The mood was calm, and what was said is uncertain, but there were no screams, no shouts, and no signs of a struggle. With her laundry part finished, a key in the door lock, her mother's holy book left behind, and having not packed a single vital item to travel with a 3-year-old toddler and an 8-week-old baby, it looked as if Nancy, Chiranjit, Ravinder and Devinder had left home of their own accord. If they were drugged, nobody saw them carried. If they walked, nobody saw them leave. And with the transit van steadily driven 76 miles from Heston to Forge Close, again, nobody heard or saw anything suspicious. Having reversed up to the sidewalk, if the family had voluntarily entered the house, not one neighbour had heard the sound of 8 people inside its wafer-thin walls. Not an angry kidnapper, a terrified hostage, 2 petrified women, or 2 wailing babies. A sight which undoubtedly would have made either of them cry, scream or flee. But it didn't. Something had made Amarjit sign, as several blank sheets of Seba Freight paper were adorned with his signature. But why? Why give up everything? Everyone has a breaking point. Maybe his loved ones were paraded before him. Maybe his family were threatened, his wife tortured, or his babies beaten. Either way, the autopsies would later confirm that every member of the Chohan family had been strangled, whether in the van, in the house, or in the sitting room. As being bound and gagged, Amarjit was forced to watch as one by one, a remorseless sadist massacred his whole family before his eyes. With his life destroyed, having served his purpose, Amarjit knew that his death was imminent. But before he died, he would sign his name one more time. On Monday the 17th of February, Kenneth Regan entered Seba Freight. In his hand, he held 2 sheets of paper. A power of attorney giving him full control over the business, and a typed letter from Amarjit, which read, "Greed has got the better of me. I've got myself into serious trouble. People are after me. I have to escape." Implying that his dealing in the legal narcotic known as cat had embroiled him with a deadly drugs cartel. Initially, the staff were shocked. But given how chaotically he had ran his business, with a new buyer mooted, the signatures a match, and the papers legit, Zebra Freight carried on under new management, with Belinda Bruin installed as its managing director, and more importantly, as Kenneth's respectable front. Only its new owner didn't waste any time admiring his £1 million empire, as in his eyes, a few insignificant little details needed to be erased. It began as a casual aside when Belinda said that she was having a drainage issue at Great Coalfield House, her 50-acre estate in the village of Studley, 90 miles south of Stonehenge. Without her knowledge, Kenneth had begun fixing the problem. But in truth, this little gift had a more sinister side. That's the beauty of this part of the Devon countryside. There's nothing but acres of fields and farms. It's never a strange sight to see a JCB digging a ditch, 6 feet deep, 14 long, and 4 wide in this neck of the woods. Nor 3 men unloading a van of 5 heavy lumps wrapped in plastic. A ferocious fire whose acrid smoke blots out the sky as an unwanted heap burns in the deep red soil of the trench. Nor is it odd to see, whatever the farmer has done, hidden under 40 tons of rubble and soil. So unfazed was Kenneth. When a friendly local got chatting to him, Kenneth quipped,
Yeah, I've done a lot of driveways for Pakistanis.
Grinning, as underneath his feet lay the bodies of the Chohan family. Within days, the safe house at Forge Close was stripped. Every item of furniture was destroyed. Every wall was repainted. Every carpet was replaced. And in place of the armchair was a 3-piece suite. Outside in the cul-de-sac, having been backed up to the sidewall, the vehicles were pressure washed inside and out. And with the blue Ford Escort scrapped, the van was returned to the hire company. And with that, Amarjit and the Chohan family had vanished for good. Only Kenneth Regan had overlooked a small, and he thought insignificant little problem irrelevant to his plan. The first little problem was Nancy. But next was her brother. With a spare key, Onka entered the bungalow at 35 Sutton Road. The door was locked and the lights were out. But as a busy family home of a mum, a dad and a gran, with a 3-year-old boy and an 8-week-old baby, the house was unnervingly silent. In her haste, Nancy hadn't packed anything for the children. No clothes, no food, no bottles and no nappies. With the laundry still in the washer and the key still in the back door, this hinted at a family crisis. But for Onka, it was the small details which made his stomach churn with fear. Ravinder's favourite toy, a little Thomas the Tank Engine, Chiranjit's cherished holy book, and her return ticket to India, which was now overdue. Having found their mobile phones dead and their bank accounts untouched, the police contacted Seba Freight, and the strange disappearance of Amarjit Chohan began to unravel. It seemed a plausible story. A chaotic businessman with a history of tax fraud gets on the wrong side of a drugs cartel. Signed by his own hand, a power of attorney and a typed letter had proven it. To any outsider, Amarjit looked suspicious as hell, and Kenneth as clean as a whistle. But there was still an unanswered question. If Amarjit had fled, what had happened to his family? Undaunted, Kenneth concocted a new plan from an old scam. He hopped on a ferry at Southampton, jumped off at the French port of Dieppe, and posted a typed letter on headed paper, which was signed by Amarjit. Postmarked the 20th of March, it arrived at Seba Freight 3 days later, clearly stating that Amarjit had had enough of England and that he was taking his family back to India. Only something didn't ring true. As with the phone message, Amarjit left voicemails for his staff in English and his wife in Punjabi. But when it came to letters, he always wrote them by hand. Kenneth didn't know this. Only those who truly knew Amarjit would. So with no money or passports, as much as the letter implied that the family were in France and heading to India, the likelihood was they were somewhere in England. Headed by Detective Chief Inspector Dave Little of Scotland Yard's Serious Crime Command, on the several occasions he interviewed Kenneth Regan, this convicted drug smuggler, forger and snitch had come across as arrogant, selfish and remorseless. When questioned, he had no answers as to why, if an Asian gang had extorted Amarjit, where were the threats against him? Why are there no ferry tickets in the name of Chohan? Why haven't the detectives found the family in the Punjab? And even more bafflingly, why did Amarjit leave his multi-million-pound business to Kenneth, a man he had met just a few months ago? Every time they spoke, his story would change. And then, it changed again. Kenneth would claim,
Okay, look. Anil hasn't fled. His family are in South Wales. I'm meant to be giving him some fake passports on Easter Monday by the bronze pig statue at the back of Newport Market.
The DCI knew this was a ploy, as the location was a deliberate choice which openly mocked the police. So as a surveillance team prepared for this meet, which they knew would never happen, the investigation continued. Identifying his known accomplices, William Hornsey and Peter Rees, mobile phone masts had pinpointed their precise movements in Southall, South Newton and Studley at around the same time that the family had vanished. Receipts for purchases were found, and traffic cameras identified the white transit van. Rightly suspicious, Belinda Bruin, Seba Freight's newly appointed managing director, approached the police and openly expressed her worries. Very little made sense. But stranger still was that on the day that Kenneth had become a new boss with a £4.5 million empire to run, he was on her farm, digging ditches. Belinda would be able to point the police to the exact location of the trench. Only Kenneth was one step ahead of her. On Saturday the 19th of April, Regan, Hornsey and Reese returned to Belinda's farm. Buried for 8 weeks, a digger unearthed the rotting remains of the family. With so little respect that the digger's tooth ripped a deep wound in Amarjit's head, and as the killers gazed upon the bodies of a father, a mother, a grandmother and 2 babies, all trussed up in plastic sheets, it was joked that they looked like Christmas crackers before being slung in the back of the van. On Sunday the 20th, having hired a speedboat, they launched from Poole and hurtling roughly 30 miles off the Dorset coast, they dumped the bodies in the English Channel and the Atlantic Sea beyond. So by the Monday, as Regan and Hornsey returned to the bronze pig statue and a surveillance team watched on, with the unabashed cockiness of 2 pathetic little boys, they scratched their heads with exaggerated expressions, performing a little pantomime, as they stood there wondering why Amarjit hadn't shown up. With no bodies, no blood, no sightings and no hard evidence, the police had very little to go on. Only for Kenneth and his murderous cohorts, the tides were about to turn. In the early hours of the 22nd of April 2003, making use of the calmer waters, David Chapman and his son Carl were canoeing off Bournemouth Pier, a popular tourist attraction with miles of sandy beaches. But as they weaved their canoes between the dark concrete piles of the cast iron pier, it was then that they spotted a body in the water. As an unidentified Asian male in his late 40s. Based on the decomposition, he had been dead for 10 weeks, but hadn't drowned, having only entered the water a few days before. And although the forensics teams were unable to obtain a fingerprint as his skin had degloved, undeniably his death was unlawful. With high levels of GHB in his system, his wrists and ankles bound, and a gag made from brown parcel tape and a red scarf still wrapped around his head, being dotted with small flecks of gravel and an odd reddish soil, the evidence suggested that he had been buried on land before being dumped in the sea. 1 week later, with his DNA proving an exact match, their worst fears were realized. Amarjit Chohan had been murdered. And yet the police were no closer to finding out who had done it and why. But then again, it's amazing the damage that a person can do with a single stroke of a pen. Having witnessed his family massacred, and knowing his death was imminent, with the same pen he had used to sign his life away, Amarjit had scrawled a few clues on a scrap of paper, such as his details, the events, and the names of his killers. That should have been enough to convict all 3, but Amarjit went one better. Instead of using any old scrap of paper, or even a sheet of his own, seeing this sat on the side table, he used a much more incriminating letter. Sent from the Cheltenham and Gloucester Bank on the 12th of February 2003 to 3 Forge Close, and addressed to Kenneth Regan. And having signed it with his own signature and folded it up into an unrecognisable lump, he hid it in his own black sock. The evidence was overwhelming. A spot of Devinder's blood at the safe house. Burned fragments of the family's clothes in the red soiled ditch. And although the vehicles had all been pressure washed, the powerful hose had merely pushed every hint of their blood and hair into the recesses of the transit van. On the 15th of July, within sight of Bournemouth Pier, a fishing trawler reeled in Nancy's decomposed body. She had been strangled, and her skull was smashed in with a hammer. But as the thick rope nets were hoisted aloft to bring her body aboard, something fell back into the sea. It was never proven, but based on what the fisherman had said, it was believed to have been either one or both of her children. On the 7th of September, the remains of Chiranjit were found, washed up on the Isle of Wight. Sadly, the bodies of 3-year-old Ravinder and 8-week-old Devinder were never found. On the 8th of November 2004, the trial began at the Old Bailey, at which all 3 pleaded not guilty. Lasting 8 months, a jury of 8 men and 3 women deliberated for 61 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict. Guilty. Convicted of murder, Peter Douglas Rees was sentenced to a minimum of 23 years, and both William Hornsey and Kenneth Regan were later sentenced to a whole life tariff. With no prospect of parole, they will never be released. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to Murder Mile. That was the final part of Signed in Blood. As always, if you'd like a less stressful half an hour, where my mouth flaps open for a bit, words come out, but mostly cake goes in, please join me after the break. But before that, here's a brief promo for a true crime podcast, which may very well be the almond in your breakfast croissant.
They murdered her. A vile and disgraceful act.
We were able to discover the remains of 2 humans.
Welcome to Crime Lapse. I am Eileen.
And I'm Charlie.
Crime Lapse is a true crime podcast that uses primary audio, in-depth research and emotive narration to give you an immersive insight into the darkest tales and most horrifying crimes.
Find Crime Lapse wherever you listen to podcasts and at Crime Lapse Podcast or at Crime Lapse Pod on social media. Everyone has a story to tell, so why not let us tell you some?
A big thank you to my new Patreon supporters, many of whom have received exclusive goodies such as badges, stickers and keyrings, as well as patron-only episodes such as Walk With Me and Deadly Thoughts. Ooh! They are Elizabeth Biancucci, Michelle Daoud, Joe Whittingham and Hannah Hardwick. I thank all of you. Plus a thank you to everyone who listens to Murder Mile, shares it with their friends and leaves a lovely review online. It's very much appreciated. I really do read all of them. And as promised, a little hi or a good day to Lou Farley in Australia. Murder Mile was researched, written and performed by myself, with the main musical themes written and performed by Eric Stein and John Books of Cult with No Name. Thank you for listening and sleep well. That was long. That was too long. Oh dear Lord, struggled over that. No complicated bloody words in that one, but it was just, I overwrote it. Oh, I have to say, I'll be honest, that was a really real bugger of an episode to write. Oh, because next week's one will be fine because it's one person basically in one place. It's nice and simple. And I love those stories because you can just focus on one person. It's nice and simple. But this one is multiple people, multiple places, different times, and I've had to cut a lot out in order to make it plausible. And even on that recording, even going through that, I was stopping and going, I need to get rid of that. That needs to go. That needs to be simplified. It's going to take a while to Last week's episode, I cut down a lot just to pare it down to the bare essentials and all the important stuff so it flowed nicely. This one is going to need to be chopped up quite a lot. But I'll have some fun with it, I think. Oh, anyway, hey, everyone. Hello, Murky Milers. Welcome to Extra Mile, the unscripted, unedited bit. The only bit of editing I do now is when it goes to the bit where I bugger off and I go and put the tea on, I bump up the little the sound just a bit more, just so people can hear it more, because it's a little bit distant. So let me do that. Let me go and put on me water, and then we're ready to rock and roll. Note to self, Michael, turn up the volume at this bit. All good. I'm just going to do something very exciting. There's a change from the usual. I will explain all in a second. Here we go. Pop that in there. Whoa, look at that. Lovely. Oi, hey, dropping things. Not good. Oh, hang on. I forgot my mug. Oh, I went over there, forgot my mug. Right, take mug back. Right, here we go. We're popping some sugar. Gotta have me sugar in there. Where's my spoon? There's my spoon. Bit of sugar, lovely. Powdered milk, yeah, of course. All good. Right. Let's head over. Right. What? Okay. First things first. We're gonna do a lot of stuff on this case because there's a lot I need to cover. So I'm gonna dive into that very shortly. First things first. Cake of the day. I have gone for an egg custard tart. Ooh. Very old-fashioned, but very nice. They're kind of like as long as your little finger and wide, but probably as deep as 3/4 of your little finger. But it's pastry on the outside, and then I'd say 90% of it is like a really nice thick custard. But the consistency's just perfect. It's like it's not too thick and gloopy, but it's got a little bit of give in it, and then there's nutmeg on the top. So yeah. Carefully baked for a silky smooth filling and sprinkled with nutmeg. I've had one already. I'm going to have another one in a bit. They are delicious, and they're reassuring as well. Second thing, I'm just about to put my tea on, but this is going to be special. My life has been changed by our good friend of the show, Mr. Dom DeLargy, of the host of the Soho Bites podcast. You would have heard me mention the brilliant Soho Bites podcast before. It's all about movies that are made in Soho, and kind of it gives you a good insight into kind of Soho. And Dom's doing a great series in there at the moment called the Morsels, and the kind of little insights into all the people who are on the big Soho mural. So it's fascinating for me, having worked there for many years. It gives me a good insight into the places that I'm walking past. And I quite often I use little pieces of information from Dom's fantastic show in this show as well. But he heard on the podcast recently that I was using tea bags for things, and he was like, "I'm sending you something in the post," and then I got it, and I said, "What the hell is that?" And I thought maybe he thinks I'm a drug dealer, because it looked like he'd sent me a green crack pipe, but it's not. It's a tea. I call it my tea crack pipe, and you put your tea leaves in. He sent me some beautiful tea leaves, and you put your tea leaves into the little thing, and then it stews. You put it in your tea, and then you squeeze it, and then it goes, and then you get a lovely cup of tea, and it's really refreshing. So I'm kind of not using bags at the moment. I've just put on this, so this is going to be a proper Dom cup of tea. I'm also using it as well. You might not know this for my coffee as well, because I've got some loose coffee as well. So thank you very much, Dom, at the Soho Bites podcast. Thank you very much. Got lots to cover, so we're going to get into that. I'm just going to say, if you fancy doing a if water is about to go, it's going to go. Let's get it because we don't want it too hot. Right, water goes in, lovely, crack pipe goes in, lovely, policemen walk past and go, oh, why has that man got a crack pipe? Why is he not smoking it? So I'm going to let that stew for a couple of minutes, just to say, if anyone is still thinking about doing a review of Murder Mile Online, and you're like, oh, keep me in to do it, now would be a great time. I'm not going to go too much into it, but I've got someone's being a bit nasty. Someone's sent me some nasty emails, and they're going online and leaving 1-star reviews everywhere, and they're like, I'm going to ruin you and stuff like that. So it's they're emailing lots of different companies I work for, and they're leaving nasty reviews everywhere. So it's something I'm not hugely bothered by, but if you want to beat the haters, you can do that by going online and leaving 5-star reviews. So for every 1-star review they leave, because a lot of them, unfortunately, when people leave reviews, you can't do anything about it. They're leaving one on TripAdvisor, and that will mean I won't get my, after 4-5 years of doing the tours, I won't get my certificate of excellence, because they'll have left me a 1-star review, which is a bit annoying. So if you did want to leave a review, that would be very much appreciated, and that will be a mid-digit to the haters. There's always one out there, isn't there? So if you did want to do that today, that would be very much appreciated. Let me get my fresh cup of tea, and we shall get started. There we go. Crack pipe out. Tea in. Oh, yummy. Yummy, yummy, yummy. No bits, Dom. No bits. It took me a while to work out the crack pipe. I ended up accidentally opening the crack pipe in the water and spilling all of the leaf everywhere, which was really frustrating. So, get myself comfortable. Yeah, but I've worked out how to do it now. I'm there, and it's very good. It's a very nice, fresh cup of tea. And also, as I found out recently, I thought tea bags are all kind of just paper and they're biodegradable, but there's quite a few of them that are not biodegradable. Because they have to go into water, they're covered in a plastic film. So some tea bags, you can throw them in the bin, that's fine. The leaves will degrade, as will the paper. But the others that have a plastic coating can't. So they're not environmentally friendly, which I object to. So having loose leaf is much better idea. Right. Whew, right. Let's do some extra details that didn't make it into the episode. I think I'd hinted at a lot in part 1, and my plan was to add a lot into part 2. But then I realised as I was writing it, there was a lot to write, so there's a lot of extraneous material that's just either I'm going to edit out now or I've already edited out. So, Belinda Bruin, who is she? She was described as a bit of a Chelsea girl. She used to be a PR executive. When I mentioned that she's got celebrity clout, she was kind of she was a long-term friend of Paula Yates, who was the TV star who was married to Michael Hutchinson, the lead singer of INXS, who had tragically committed suicide in 1997. Paula Yates, as we know, had a drugs overdose September 2000. So she was very close to the family. That's what I meant by the celebrity clout. Obviously she's doing well. She drove sports cars, and she often frequented the top floor bar at Harvey Nichols. Lots of stuff like that. But also, she just recently moved into a 7-bedroomed 15th century house, which we've mentioned, which had horses, and her children were at private school, and all very good. Let me just get down here. So, Kenneth had actually tried to kind of chat her up and was flirting with her, and was offering her loads of things, as he did with any attractive woman comes along. He offers them, expensive watches. He thinks he can buy people like that because he doesn't have a personality. Obviously, she's a self-made person. She's very intelligent. She uses him for what she needs to, as a kind of business person, because she can see that he can get things done, but she tries to keep him at an arm's distance. Anyway, after he'd just come out of prison, he kind of got back in touch with her. She needed money by that point, as we mentioned in the story, and that's how they kind of got together. The McDonald's deal that I mentioned in part 1, I was going to do more on it in here, but I decided not to because it really slowed down the story. But January 2003, Kenneth Regan was trying to organise a £3 million deal for land near Heathrow. I've mentioned it was Hatton Cross, and it was a McDonald's franchise. As a respectable front, he got his friend Belinda Bruin to come in. She's one of these people. She's very organised. She's very efficient. She can get things done, and she's very personable. So she's kind of the person that you want on your side. He's quite an aggressive man, so that's why things often fall flat, which is why he needed an acceptable face. Now he's quite a manipulative man. Many years ago, he had a plot of land that he wanted to sell to a house builder, but he couldn't get the planning permission on there. So what he did was he spoke to the council and he said, we've got gypsies, a travelling community currently on the site. I tell you what, you give me planning permission if I promise to get rid of them. I'll find a way to get rid of them and that'll solve the problem. And that was what the council did. But what they didn't realise was he'd actually paid for the travelling community to be on the site, and then he just turns up and goes, right, clear off. So this was the kind of way that he did things. He doesn't know how to do anything properly. He just, if there's an easy way to do it, he'll do it. And there's not really a lot said about what happened with this McDonald's deal, but it did collapse. Also around this time, don't forget, he just left prison like 6 months before that. So already around this time, this was mentioned in court that he was already trying to work out with a friend of his called Eric Daniels how to smuggle in 2.5 tons of cocaine into the country via the seaport at Fishguard. He was looking round Devon and places like that because it has good sunlight, of farms where he could grow cannabis. Don't forget, this is also the area where he kind of grew up as well, so he knows the southwest of England. It was around this time that Eric Daniels had said, "Look, I don't want to be any part of this, of the kind of drug deal." So that's when he got back in touch with William Hornsey, his old pal, and Peter Rees. We'll have a little bit more on that very shortly. It was said with William Hornsey that he hadn't really forgiven him for the fact that Kenneth Regan had kind of dobbed him in when he was a super snitch, and that's one of the reasons why William Hornsey was sent to prison. But I may have edited this out of the episode. I probably did because I think it threw off the episode. Kenneth Regan lured him back in by saying, look, before we went into prison, I stashed £2 million in an offshore account. So when our parole kind of ends, because they've got to be careful about what they're spending and what they're seen doing and things like that, although it didn't seem to stop them murdering people, he said, look, there's £2 million here, we'll share it. That was clearly a lie. So the murder, let's go into the disposal of the family and so as we mentioned, Belinda had her home. It was a great coalfield house in Studley. If you look at it on the map, it's very remote. It's a very lovely place, lovely little estate, but it's very remote, middle of nowhere, little drive, loads of fields around the side. She was having a drainage problem, and it was only a casual conversation that she'd had with him, but he'd already decided, perfect. It's remote. He can be there with the digger. He can get this done. He can. If you remember at the start of the story, he trained as a HGV driver, but he also learnt to lay driveways as well. So this is the kind of thing he can do anyway. So by the time she got there, the driveway had been done. The drainage ditch had been dug. If you think about it, she's got no reason to dig that up at all and to think of it as suspicious. The only reason she thought it was suspicious was why was he doing that when he'd just become the boss of a £4.5 million fruit and veg empire. Didn't make sense. Also, he didn't ask her permission at all. He just started digging. So apparently she was absolutely furious when she saw it. The cleaning up of the safe house at 3 Forge Close. Yes. So one of the neighbours said he looked out of the window one morning and he noticed that the van was gone. We'll get to that very shortly. Regan had replaced the flooring in the front room, and he'd gone to Carpet Right, the carpet shop in Salisbury, and he bought loads of kind of remnant carpets, so not really expensive stuff. When he walked in there, he told the saleswoman that he wanted a 3-piece suite, which would not show up the stains because his father, in inverted commas, was a dirty old man. The saleswoman, Amy Hazard, told the police how he had ordered a 3-piece suite, including a recliner chair, from Courts in Salisbury. He said he didn't want a long sales pitch. He kind of just rushed in to complete the purchase. She did point out that there was a defect in the reclining mechanism, but he didn't care. He didn't even ask for a discount. When the delivery man turned up to deliver all the new furniture into the safe house, he said there was nothing there. He said there was no old furniture, and the room had been entirely redecorated. Kenneth Regan's father, Roy, we're not really too sure how much he knew about this. It looks like he knew nothing at all. It looks like he was kept out of the way. But he gave a statement to the police about the refurbishment 10 days before he died. So he actually died in 19th of May 2003. And he said, it was only a few weeks ago, that's his son Kenneth, Ken had mentioned before that he wanted a new sofa. One day I went out of the house, and when I returned, Ken was in the house and the carpet was missing. I'd been only out for about 2 hours. I noticed the floor in the lounge, on the floor in the lounge was a white paper. He doesn't say what that is. Ken said he'd just come into money and decided to change the carpet and the sofa. It's mentioned before we got the taking over of Sabre Freight, so that's pretty fast. It's like effectively murders the family on the Saturday, does his paperwork Sunday, goes straight in Monday morning. I'm the new boss. Here's the power of attorney. I'm taking over the business. It may seem strange, but don't forget this company has been taken over before from other people. Amarjit has mentioned, people said that he ran his business a little bit chaotically. There was the worries about that he'd taken out £50,000 using 3 company checks. He got a history of tax fraud. So, it would seem strange, but when you've got someone who kind of keeps secrets and goes off and has deals with people and doesn't tell his partners, also don't forget that they're dealing in cat, which is the legal in this country but illegal elsewhere narcotic as used in Somalia. So it sells fruit and veg, but it also sells narcotics. So there's a lot of oddness going on in this kind of in this background. Anyway, Belinda Broom was brought in. She had no prior experience as a managing director, but Kenneth had come in and said, she's the person I want. She's in control of this. She pretty much knew nothing about this. For her, it was just a job. It's like, fine, I'll come in and help you out. It's a bit of money. She was working 2 days a week and earning £6,000 a month. So you can understand why she would say yes to doing that. The money didn't come from Kenneth Regan's own pocket, as you'd expect. It came straight from Sabre Freight. What else we got? Let's keep diving down. Yep, so the distance from Three Forge Close, which is where the safe house is, to Belinda's place is 90 miles, so that would have taken them about an hour and 45 minutes in the van, probably about 2 hours. The police later caught them on CCTV, so they could see the van and they could track them. What the men could have done is switched off their mobiles, because obviously even if you're not using your phone, it's still pinging off the networks to try and get the best signal. And all 3 of their phones were spotted in South Newton, South Hall and Studley. So all the 3 key locations. So that's how the police were able to track down the van. They used obviously we've got traffic cameras everywhere, so that really helped. What else did we have? They rented a digger from JB Plant Hire in Salisbury. See, everything was pretty much legitimately done. Nothing was stolen. They didn't, unlike some criminals who go out and they go, I'm going to steal a car and then I can use that as my getaway car. They just rented shit. It's just, it's easier. And then you can take it back and then, someone else uses it. So therefore someone else's DNA will be there. So, sometimes having a rental car, even though it leaves a bit of a trail, not a terrible idea, especially if enough time has elapsed. Let's see. I'm going to try not to do all the stuff that we've already covered before. Oh yeah, they were cleaning up the transit van. So as mentioned, the transit van was backed up to the wall. They were using pressure hoses. Mr. Smith, who was a neighbour in Forge Close, told the court that Roy had lived there for more than 30 years. He remembered seeing the white van outside. He couldn't remember the date exactly, but he said it was a very frosty morning. I got up to put the rubbish out. I pulled the curtains open. I could see Mr. Regan's back door was open and there was a light on. A white van was backed up to the garden gate. So if you look at the pictures, there's no way to see the back of the van when it's backed up that way, or the side as well. He said it was roughly around 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was being. He said by the time he got there, the van looked wet, but as though it had been washed. But he knew it hadn't rained that night. I've probably taken this out of the episode. I think I was doing it as I was walking along. This happened. Oh, I'm gonna have a slurp of tea. I've been waffling. Slurp of tea time. This was something that happened, and I tried to put it in the episode, but then I think I've alluded to it. 21st of January 2003. So this is roughly 8 days after Amarjit goes missing. The blue Ford Escort, the exact one, so same registration plate, had a minor collision with another car in Kurdridge, a little village west of Southampton. Now, obviously, this is Amarjit Chohan's car, but he's dead by that point, and so is his family. But around midday, the car was involved in an accident. It was only a minor collision. The people got out. In Amarjit's car was a driver who was white, 6 foot tall, medium build with short brown hair, and the passenger was a light-skinned black male, 5'10", and stocky with a close-cut black hair. Both men were wearing blue mechanic-style overalls. They gave false names at the scene. Obviously, people wouldn't know that until later, and then they left. It wasn't really said who those people were, but it was believed that they were friends of Kenneth Regan, who kind of owned a scrapyard, and he had sold them the car to scrap. So hopefully I've mentioned that in the episode, but the car was scrapped. I've got a lot of editing to do on this episode. As mentioned, with the fake letter that was sent to say Amarjit had kind of disappeared. So on the 19th of March, he travels to Southampton, gets the ferry over to Dieppe. Sorry, I'm just reading ahead on this. Yes, which is obviously a point of entry into Europe. He gets over there. He gets one of the sheets of paper that Amarjit has already signed, the headed note paper. He writes the note saying, I've had enough of England. I'm going to go to India with my family, which explains where his family was going. Sent it from France, postmarked to 30th of March. By the time it made it to Sea Freight, that was around the 23rd, the 24th. The staff opened it up, and it was a typewritten letter explaining what had been going on. But obviously, they were already looking at thinking, why would Amarjit, why would he type a letter? He never types letters. He always handwrites. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If you're fleeing with your family, why would you take a typewriter with you, or why would you take a laptop and then go and find a place to have it printed off? You wouldn't. You'd write it on a scrap of paper and then send it off. We've done all the stuff about the police investigation. I'm not going to go too much into that. Obviously, we've got the bit about the bronze pig, which I giggled at when I listened to this, because obviously I went to college in Newport. All right, but what's that do then, innit? And when they mentioned the bronze pig, I was like, oh shit. I remember the bronze pig. It's right at the back of the market, and every time we'd come out of the clubs and we'd be a bit drunk, we'd go around the back of there because there's some good chip shops. Lots of fun times happened around the fat bronze pig. So I remember that. So obviously I wasn't there in 2003, Milad. I hope I've left that episode in. If not, I apologise. As mentioned, on the 9th of April, Belinda Bruin had already become suspicious. She went straight to the police and started telling them what she knew about this, what she didn't know. There were lots of things that just didn't make sense to her at all. She even said that the meeting with the bronze pig, she was like, that doesn't exist at all. That's entirely fictitious. But by that point, Regan and his pals had become spooked. So this was around the Easter weekend, so the 19th, 20th and 21st of April. That's when they dug up the bodies. Again, they got another digger. If you can appreciate it, it's in the country, so who's going to really notice some men digging up another hole in the country? Who's going to really notice that at all? It's like, if it was in the city, everyone would go, ooh, look at that. Country, who cares? It's like, it's the kind of thing you'd expect. Because it was a very specific soil, I've mentioned this in there, that it's quite a reddish soil. Even though the bodies had been there for about 8 weeks, they reckon, they were relatively well preserved given the amount of time. They were the soil and the rubble was quite dry. They were away from insects and maggots and flies, so they decomposed. And there was still a smell of decomposition, but not as much as you'd expect if they'd been in a kind of a more waterlogged soil, which is why no one else could really smell it. And because they were wrapped in plastic, it was easy for the men just to throw the bodies in the back of the van. No one would really quiz that at all. The body's been dumped at sea. So this was done on Easter Sunday 2003, which is the 20th of April. Very little was reported about this. This was a real pig to try and work out where they did it. We know they got a boat somewhere near Poole off the Dorset coast. The exact location is unknown, but it literally is miles of empty coastline. So they could have done it anywhere. 30 miles away from the ditch was Exmouth, so they could have gone there, or Sidmouth. These are all in Devon, lots of unoccupied coastline. But interestingly, what they seem to have done is instead of travelling west, which makes sense as that's nearer the coast and nearer the Atlantic, they travelled east to go to the coast. If they did do it in and around kind of the Bournemouth area, Bournemouth or Poole. So they ended up being about 136 miles where they reckon the body was dumped from the Atlantic coast. So that means that if they did it from Exmouth, the bodies would have travelled in the water about 75 miles. That's roughly as the crow flies. This is one of the bits where I always do my little bit of research. I don't like it when people say things were possibly dumped here. I always do my research. So the tidal flow in that area is about 1 metre per second, which is about 2 to 3 miles per hour. But in some stretches, it's 3.5 metres per second, which is about 8 miles an hour, which is relatively fast tide. So if the bodies were dumped off the Devon and Dorset coast, in a boat kind of near kind of Exmouth, stuff like that, it kind of, the tides make sense because it's flowing that way, not out into the Atlantic. It's flowing back in towards Bournemouth and the Isle of Wight. So that's why the bodies come back in. It's kind of washing up, and if the bodies hadn't come inland, they would have kept going kind of up and around the North Sea, around Holland and that kind of area. So it made it in there's kind of an inlet between Bournemouth and the Isle of Wight, and that's kind of where the bodies got stuck and washed around. What else we got? Mentioned, yep. The autopsy was kind of, they didn't really know who he was. They knew he'd been in the water for 9 to 10 weeks. He'd just been in the water for 2-3 days. Amarjit had got a large wound to his head. We know that was from the metal digger used to excavate him. They couldn't fingerprint him, as mentioned. He'd been in the sea for a bit, and he was decomposed, so his hands are degloved. They initially did a DNA check, but they couldn't find a check against anyone else on the system. The partial gag was still around his head and his mouth. Also his nose and his eyes. So it looked like they may have murdered him that way, as they did at the end of part 1, using the brown adhesive tape and the red scarf. So this would have caused asphyxiation. One thing I did take out was around this time there was a real lack of funding for the National Missing Persons Helpline. It was almost about to fold that March because they were really struggling for emergency funding, and it had been noted the police had got in touch and said, we're trying to find this person. We've found a body of an Asian man, this kind of age, in this area. If you know of any details, let us know. Anyway, they did their usual checks as they always did, and they were like, oh well, Amarjit Chohan is missing, and that's actually where the first connection was made. So it's from the missing persons helpline that actually they went to the Chohan house. They found some DNA from some hair from one of the family members. I believe it was from one of the children, and that confirmed that was Amarjit Chohan. I took that out of the episode because by this point we're running out of time. This was one of those episodes where I thought, okay, it can't be a one-part episode because there's a lot to tell, and there's enough to tell a two-part episode, but there's a lot to cram into a 2, and you kind of, if you have a 3, I just thought to myself, oh no, I'm going to be treading water in episode 3, so that's why episode 2 is a little bit full. This was interesting. So after the autopsy was done, as you can appreciate, the autopsy is all about the body. They remove all the clothes and put them in bag, and then all the clothing is handed over to a forensic scientist, and this was Professor Kenneth Pye. I apologise. And he goes through all the personal belongings and the possessions and things like that. And he was the one who actually, when he looked at the socks, he looked inside and he found the little letter that had been folded up. And apparently it was like A4 letter, but been folded up at least 8 times. So it was about the size of a little matchbox. And Anil, aka Amarjit, had hidden it inside his one of his socks. So it's amazing. I'll post a picture online. Considering it's been in the water and considering it was buried for a couple of days, it's still relatively in good condition, and kind of his writing on it was kind of clear, and you could read it very clearly. So without that, would we really have been able to prove what had really gone on? It was proven that Amarjit's Ford Escort had been sold for scrap in the Southampton area on the 21st of February. Only a few parts of the car were recovered. There were no fingerprints of the occupants. And the two owners who were found in the car, it was proved that they had... because I didn't put this in the episode, I didn't check this. So what I just said earlier on about them being friends of Kenneth Regan, it was proven that the purchase was legitimate and they were not connected to Kenneth Regan. Obviously, the 2 men who were in that car, although it was said in the papers they gave false names. Why did they give false names? Maybe because the car wasn't insured. Anyway, the arrest of Regan, Rees and Hornsey. So when the body was confirmed that it was Amarjit Chohan, detectives went to interview all those involved, but all of them have fled by that point. Where did they go? Kenneth Regan fled to France on the ferry. Peter Rees went on the run in Gloucestershire, very exotic, just round the corner. Let me see, I think I've got some more details about this coming up. The blood spot of Devinder that was found on the wall outside. Forensics said it was outside on the garden wall by the side where the van was, and they said it had proven to have come from Devinder, who was the 8-week-old baby. It was 4 foot off the ground and was described as a downward drop, suggesting that the toddler was being carried at the time. So we still don't know where the family were murdered. Whether it was in the van, whether it was in the safe house, but it's likely that it was in the safe house, or maybe in the van. We don't know. As mentioned, Kenneth Regan's father Roy died while he was on the run, so he was unable to go to his own father's funeral. Boo hoo hoo. What else we got? I think that's it. Oh yeah, so 14th of May 2003, Peter Rees was arrested. He was arrested in a pub in Colford in the Forest of Dean. He was brought to Central London Police Station for questioning and charged with the murders of perverting and preventing Mr. Chohan's burial. 2nd of August 2003, Kenneth Regan had been on the run. He'd run out of money while he was in Spain and was arrested at a campsite in Ghent in Belgium. This took quite a while because he was in Belgium. They had to get loads of extradition treaties, and it was a real pain in the arse. And then the 2nd of September, William Hornsey was fed up with his life on the run. He returns to Dover and actually gave himself up. What we know about William Hornsey is that he was a former accountant, and then he decided to become a kidnapper and a murderer. I think that's it. I think that's everything. Yeah, I think that's done. So everything else went into the episode. That was a long one. Yeah, sorry about that. There was a lot of details to add in there, and I was like, right, let's just get it done. Let's get all the information in there. If you want to know more, because obviously I'm probably going to end up cutting a lot of pieces out of this, but if you want to know more, people are really enjoying my Walk With Me episode. I know I waffle on about it a lot, but what it is that after I've edited this episode and, after I've cut a lot of stuff out and I've simplified it, what I do is I tell you all the stuff that I can't tell you at this point because I don't know whether it's going in and whether it's not going in, and there'll be things that I've kind of forgotten and need to go in. And I let you into little secrets about the editing and, the sounds that I do and why I do certain things, and people seem to enjoy it. It's a nice little casual walk with me. It's a little bit of fun, and we have a giggle. So that's available only via Patreon. You can listen to that for I think it's like $3 a month. No, sorry. That one's the $7 a month, which in real money is about £5. So, but there's loads of episodes already up there already to listen to. You can, if you want, jump in, have a listen to some of the earlier episodes, see if you like it. If you do like it, stay. If you don't, that's not a problem at all. Anyway, that was that. I'm going to have to edit this. Oh, I'm exhausted. I'm going to have to edit this. I'm doing the... this will be done by the time you get to it, but I'll be doing the live interview with Adam from UK True Crime and Chantel from the Lady Justice podcast tonight, which is obviously by the time you listen to this will be last week, so I'm doing that tonight. I'm going to be exhausted. I've got to get this done. I've got a custard tart to eat, and I've got a lovely cup of tea, which is yeah, I'm going to have to reheat that because that's going cold. Right, that was good. Hope you enjoyed that. That was good fun. Next week we've got a one-parter. Yay, one-parter, which involves one person in basically one place. So it shouldn't be a bloody nightmare for me to edit and all write. Hope you enjoyed that. Please do stay safe and have yourself a good week. Be good. Bye-bye.